The Allen Line Company appreciates all of the dedicated carriers it takes to move loads across the U.S. Stay safe.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
The EPA is forging ahead with strict new emission standards for heavy trucks. Jay Grimes, OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, joins us to break down what the rule means and why the association objects to it, and more. On March 26, the Key Bridge in Baltimore collapsed. As federal and state officials met to discuss the situation, they realized they need someone from trucking involved. I'll get an update from OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh. The 35th annual Make-A-Wish Mother's Day Convoy in Pennsylvania is right around the corner. We catch up with the Convoy chairperson to talk about the event. And finally, the OOIDA Board of Directors meets this week, and a lot of the issues we discuss here on the show are on the agenda. I'll get a preview from Bryce Munchen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. But first, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is forging ahead with the final rule on greenhouse gas emissions for heavy-duty trucks. We've got new details on this story and, frankly, a lot of questions about where this is all headed. So joining us to answer each and every one of them is Jay Grimes, OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs. Jay, good to see you.
Good to be with you.
So we were talking earlier, there have been so many EPA rules that have come out in recent months. It really is hard to keep track of what's what here. But this rule, this Phase 3 rule for heavy trucks, is the big one. It's been published now. Walk us through what this rule aims to do.
Yeah, it basically sets a target of emissions reduction levels for heavy-duty trucks, that would be beginning for long-haul trucks in model year 2030. Then by 2032, all new trucks have to have 25% reductions in current emissions. That doesn't sound so bad, but when you look at the incentives that it is going to provide for electric vehicle manufacturing, we've already heard a lot from the manufacturers that meeting these goals is basically untenable given the timelines that are finalized in this rule. And kind of given so many unknowns about how electric vehicles are going to work, particularly in the heavy-duty long-haul sector, we kind of question, why are we mandating such an aggressive timeline when we're don't know if the technology works, and certainly some of the cost projections are astronomical.
And we'll certainly jump into those objections here a bit more in detail in just a moment, but I want to make sure we understand the timeline here. So you mentioned 2030, but again, the EPA has now published this final rule. Yep. We're talking about, bureaucracy and red tape and procedures and this and that. But in short, this means the timeline is moving ahead as scheduled, right?
Yeah, and even for some smaller vehicles, some other classes, model year 2027 are some of these emission targets going to start. And when you kind of look at some of the reactions from the truck engine manufacturers, they're not convinced that they can meet some of these timelines. And we've seen historically that when they're not able to meet the timelines, the first vehicles that come off the lines are very high priced and not as reliable as they should be, and that results in more downtime, more maintenance. And these are concerns that we've raised through EPA on a number of other rulemaking, some of which have been finalized in recent years, and they don't particularly seem to have learned their lesson. And I think part of the results are going to be that drivers are going to, be forced to hold on to their older truck for a longer period of time because they're not going to be able to afford the new vehicles, and they're not going to be reliable.
Which is going to have the opposite effect, which we've talked about before.
Cleaner air.
Yeah, exactly. And we've talked about this before too, but everybody out here wants clean air, truck drivers included. I don't think we've got too many fans of pollution out there.
Nope.
But again, this is the feasibility of this.
Right.
And I know that's a huge objection here. And you mentioned briefly the objection in terms of small business truckers and the burden this will place on them. EPA has heard all these things and they have responded, but the response has essentially been, tough. We're moving ahead, right?
Thanks, but no thanks. And I think the major problem here is that the EPA rules, these emission rules, are specifically designed and targeted for the truck manufacturers. So those are the folks that are going to have to be in line with the rule. They kind of fail to take into account the end consumer, which from the large portion of the trucking industry is going to be small fleets, small businesses, owner-operators, and they kind of don't particularly care about what the costs are going to be on the consumer side as long as the manufacturers can at least attempt to meet some of these standards. And even if they do, we kind of see these higher price tags, these vehicles that really aren't 100% reliable when they first come off the lines in model year 2027, model year 2030 for most of the long-haul trucks. And we've seen this historically on a number of other different EPA rulemakings, and it really takes a toll on small businesses.
Let's talk about potential roadblocks to this, because there are, at some point in the near future, I think, right, going to be congressional resolution acts on this issue, this very issue that we're talking about here. What will that look like, and how realistic an option is it of derailing this plan, so to speak?
Right. So now that the rule has been formally published, it kind of sets a 60-day clock for Congress to bring up Congressional Review Act legislation, which is really a simple resolution that would repeal the final rule. There's got to be a little more bureaucratic steps. They got to transmit it formally to the Senate. That should take place, I think, relatively soon. And within the next couple of weeks, we will see both in the House and Senate measures to repeal this rule. Congressman Russ Fulcher from Idaho has indicated he will be introducing it on the House side. Senator Dan Sullivan from Alaska on the Senate side. And we're going to kind of have to see if this passes the House and the Senate. Now, it's going to be tough because even if they do pass the House and the Senate, the president can veto the final rule. And I think he did that last year with another EPA rulemaking on NOx emissions. Right. So I would expect he would do that the same, and then he would need 2/3 of Congress to overturn that veto, and I'm not sure their votes are there given the slim margins in both of the House and Senate. But, it's an election year. This is going to be a major issue for a lot of industries throughout the trucking side, and we've already been coordinating with a lot of different stakeholders who have similar concerns.
And look, 2030 is a long way away, but it's also not that long away. No. It's one of these things, especially if you're looking at a big mandate like this. My last question for you, Jay, before we let you go. We always talk about people reaching out to their lawmakers. On something like this, it's a little bit different, obviously, because it's the EPA, a government agency. Are there ways that people should be reaching out right now and making sure that people understand what this is all about?
Yeah, I think be on the lookout when we have this Congressional Review Act resolutions formally introduced. We'll get a bill number, and that's when we can really try and contact lawmakers who might be on the fence and try and build up as much support as we can to pass those bills and overturn this harmful final rule. Because you mentioned we're only 5, 6, 7 years away, but we don't have really any of the necessary charging infrastructure in place, and really no plans to kind of get that up and going in that short amount of time.
Yeah, if we had those plans, if we had the infrastructure, I could see how this would work out, but we don't. So we'll see where it goes. Jay, a pleasure as always. Thanks for putting this issue into focus for us. We appreciate it.
Sure thing.
And that's Landline Now News for today. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. You can write a letter to your elected officials in Congress by using the website fightingfortruckers.com. Again, that website, fightingfortruckers.com. Next, I'll get the latest on the bridge collapse in Baltimore and its effect on trucking from OOIDA's Louis Pugh. Ashley Blackford talks with Terry Finch of the Make-A-Wish Mother's Day Convoy in Pennsylvania. And I'll talk with Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Landline Now, welcome back. On Tuesday, March 26, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which carries Interstate 695 over the Patapsco River in Baltimore, Maryland, was struck by a container ship and collapsed into the water below, killing 6 highway workers who were on the bridge doing road repair work. Since then, highway traffic has been diverted onto other roadways, and the Port of Baltimore has temporarily closed. The situation continues to develop with federal and state agencies, the port, and others working together to address the situation. As those federal and state officials meet, they've realized they need to have someone from trucking involved in the discussions to ensure minimal disruptions to the supply chain. And the group they've invited to take part is OOIDA. OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh has been part of those discussions on behalf of the association and truckers, and he's here with me now with the latest. Louis, thanks for joining me.
Hey, it's great to be here, Mark. Always enjoy.
So basically, late last week, you had a meeting with several federal and state agencies. Which ones were involved?
Yeah, on this one, this is the third one I've been a part of, and this is the first one that it's just been us. In the past, they've had larger meetings with everybody from shipping and rail and air and trucking and just all transportation, bus, anything you can imagine, like 100 people or more. And of course, I like to talk, so I spoke up at all of them. So this one here was sort of one of the things that they reached out to us because it's a concern that I've been bringing up since this all started, and that's parking. And you're going to have more parking, of course, an emergency with this because of all the delays and the traffic and all this other thing. So, yeah, DOT and FMCSA and Federal Highway reached out to me the other day and asked if we could get together and have a meeting. So, of course, I agreed, and we did. And it was us, Federal Highway, myself, folks from Federal Highway, from FMCSA, and then also from Maryland, DOT of Maryland, and part of Maryland Transportation Authority and stuff. So.
Let's talk a little bit about the parking situation there, because obviously with all this diversion and people being stuck and having to go around longer routes and everything, it's pretty obvious to anybody involved in the business that there's going to be some real tangles. Were there specific solutions or possible solutions discussed at this meeting for the parking problems?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the good thing about this is, because like I said, in these greater meetings that we've had in the past, I have asked for a few things for them to think about and to do to try to help alleviate traffic and make this as easy as they can on truckers. But, we haven't really, I just, said you need to be looking at alternatives for parking. Well, this time that's what this conversation was about. I don't like to use the word surprisingly, but I guess in this case, because I think these people are working really hard. And I mean, they got a real mess dumped in their lap right away. And, nobody knows how to plan for these things. Unfortunately, I mean, you practice and practice and practice until something like this really happens. But really, I mean, I think we should all be happy and impressed. They have really got it together. They have already started looking at parking. They're really watching traffic flow. We had a lot of charts and stuff there. They're talking about traffic, how traffic's moving, how much more percentage of traffic's moving through the tunnels and going around. They're watching the traffic, like the alternate routes, like going across 50 and 301, how much more traffic's over there. They realize that when it comes to this parking, not only do they need more parking right there in Baltimore Metro, but they've actually started they've partnered with the Eastern Transportation Coalition and other states around Maryland, up into New York, Virginia, Delaware, New Jersey, and in Pennsylvania. Because, of course, there's people coming to town trying to get out to tell them, too, like, these routes, your major routes that get you to Baltimore, let's be thinking, and you guys be thinking, if you can add additional parking somewhere, they're looking at state-owned land, federal-owned land where there's already parking. They've reached out to like some private business associations in Baltimore and other places to see if they can offer up. They've reached out to universities and colleges. The ports, of course, they went into ports and like, hey, if you got any empty area in these ports, we need to set aside some of this for trucks to park. Actually, another cool thing, and I say it because I'm a member, but I guess the American Legion in Baltimore, I've never been there, but apparently they have a decent sized parking lot, and they like volunteered parking for truckers as much, I guess the way they said it'd be a limited amount, but they said that truckers could use their lot. So the big box stores, just warehouses, just all kinds of stuff. Wanted to know what we thought of that, what they are doing, if we had any more suggestions or ideas of other ways they could go. So like I said, it was a very impressive meeting. I think it's helped that for the last couple years or more that OOIDA, for the last 20, we've been beating the drum, but it's really this parking stuff has come to the mainstream the last few years. So they're already aware that there's already a problem, and this is just exacerbating the problem even worse. And so they got some good ideas, and they've really implemented some well thought out plans very quickly.
You mentioned some of the alternate routes that truckers are having to take because of this closure. And, of course, that is a major crossing right next to a major facility that truckers have to service at the port. I'm wondering, are there specific areas due to those highway changes where they're seeing a special problem greater than others?
Yeah, that's what was interesting on the flow charts that they had that I was watching. Not only did it show the impact of the more traffic, but the speeds. It was interesting to see, like, some of the routes they showed, like, with the outer belt going around Baltimore on the east side, or the west side, on the west side, everybody, if you got hazmat or whatever, you can't go through the tunnels, so you're going to have to go around the west side now instead of the short way around the east side. Like, during rush hour in the afternoon, the speed, these are all averages. Okay, so the average speed at the time would be 40 to 50 mile an hour at those time frames in the past few months. Since this has happened, the average speed is like 25 mile an hour during afternoon rush hour. And we're seeing that in other places too. I mean, because it's like you watch those charts and, traffic through the day, and they just have a little dip. I mean, as a trucker driving around there, I was kind of surprised because it seems like you're going slower than that for a while, but I understand it's charts and it's all averages. But boy, now it goes across and then it does a big old horseshoe at those rush hour times, and then it comes back up. And so they understand that it's taking drivers a lot longer, and it's going to make drivers run out of hours. But yeah, it's very interesting. And my understanding from what they told me was they've been really, really focusing on the Baltimore traffic and the areas around there. Now they're kind of branching out to watch the traffic on the alternate routes and different ways to go. But they also, which they brought up a good point, because of course, trucks and trains and stuff can still get into the port, but boats aren't getting in there quite yet. And when the boat traffic starts coming back in, they feel that there's probably going to be more shifts, because right now it's traffic shifted one way, and then when the boats and we start getting the ports back up and things start rolling out of there again like they were, then traffic's going to shift another way. So they're trying to remain really fluid in this, which is what they need to be doing, of course, and having different things different where, and try to, they showed me the chart of parking places now, like where they are, where the hot spots are, which none are really surprising anytime we see those kind of charts. But they're looking now to where there's going to be new hot spots where there weren't and stuff like that.
One of the things that I don't think we can stress enough here is you mentioned some alternate routes, and especially for those truckers who aren't actually going specifically to Baltimore but are trying to just get through that area. You mentioned 50 and 301. And just for folks who haven't heard our previous coverage or maybe are going through there and aren't as familiar as you are with it, can you kind of walk people through that alternate route just so they know?
Yeah, if you don't have to go to Baltimore, and might as well I tell anybody, if you don't have to deliver from north of D.C. to the Delaware line on 95, probably your best bet. And I mean, I used to truck over there all the time, and I haven't been over there for 6 years now trucking, just to be fair. So maybe things have changed. I'm sure things have changed a little bit. 50, you can always get on 50 over on the Beltway of DC on the east side and run it over to Annapolis and across the Bay Bridge, and then you get on 301, and that'll bring you out up at Delaware at the line. And I mean, it's good running. It's 4-lane, and going through Maryland, it's 4-lane. There's some cross roads and stuff like that. It's not like a complete interstate, but it's still pretty good running, especially in the evenings and stuff like that. And it's good road. So, to me, it would make more sense to go that way than to go up through Baltimore. And I think I looked at the miles on the computer, and if I remember correctly, especially if you got hazmat on and you can't go through the tunnel, but you could, it's almost identical, same amount of miles as going up to Baltimore and around the west side, because it's so much longer around the west side of Baltimore on the belt on 695. So, and when you don't have to mess with that traffic, you don't have to mess with Baltimore and any of that other stuff. That's something to keep in mind and think about, of course, and there's plenty of websites and stuff out there you can kind of go in and look at traffic and stuff. But again, I know it's frustrating for truckers out there, and you're probably really frustrated sitting in traffic. And if you're watching this, you're thinking how frustrating it really is. But they really are. They've really come together well. From the meetings that I've been on, from the 2 days after this happened till now, they've really hit this problem head on. I think the folks that sometimes frustrates us, the bureaucrats and stuff that we get frustrated about, I think they're earning their pay right now, and they're doing a really, really good job. And they definitely understand how important truck transportation is and tractor trailers and what you all have to deal with out there on the road. I say this anytime we talk about is, the biggest thing to remember, and they asked this of me to say this too, is just to please try to be patient, calm, cool while getting through there, because that's the other thing that's happened. And I'm not saying this is trucks, because we know who causes most of the accidents. Accidents have really freaking shot up over there. But, we all know that people in cars get, they don't want to follow a truck. They hate a truck. They get very impatient and do dumb things. So just try to leave an extra room and try not to get upset when they do dumb things. But yeah, that's a bad thing. There's been a lot more increase in accidents. But they mentioned they didn't have any problem saying it's mostly the cars doing dumb stuff too.
Something, we've just got 2 minutes left here, that you mentioned earlier is the fact that truckers may be running out of hours in the middle of this mess. And I recall something, and my memory's a little addled right now, that they were talking about that exception where you can go 2 extra hours in adverse conditions. Are truckers able to use that provision in this situation?
I got to go back and look, and I apologize because I've been out for a week and a half at CVSA and some other stuff. But that's one thing that we brought up from the get-go was that 2 hours that you're allowed out for adverse conditions, that's not supposed to be for traffic. It's supposed to be for something unknown. So they said if it was rush hour at 5 o'clock, that's going to happen. So I asked that they would be allowed to have that thing in Baltimore. They have gave them some more driving time in Baltimore, but if I remember correctly, is they extended the amount of hours you could drive, but they didn't extend your 14.
Okay.
Which that makes it a little rough. But
at least people know.
Yeah,
and that's important.
we can massage that, hopefully, if it's not, and try to get them to give us that extra 2 hours on the other end. Because that's my thing. I said, when you're a trucker and you're going into this mess in Baltimore, this isn't your normal rush hour traffic, and who knows how long it's going to take. And they agreed, so see what happens.
Okay. Well, Louis, I think we're running out of time a little bit here, but I want to thank you very much for coming down to talk with us, and hopefully we got people some information they can use.
Hey, it's my pleasure, and be safe out there, truckers, and thanks for what you all do. We appreciate you.
I've been talking with OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh about discussions OOIDA has taken part in with federal and state officials and others regarding the reaction and recovery from the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse in Baltimore, Maryland. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
When it's time to overhaul your truck engine, help protect it by insisting on a genuine Vibratech TVD crankshaft damper. Heavy duty, absolute premium quality, and they're made right here in the USA. Find a dealer at vibratechtvd.com. It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. This year marks the 35th anniversary of the Make-A-Wish Mother's Day Truck Convoy in Manheim, Pennsylvania. Terry Finch is the Convoy chairperson. She joins me now to talk about the upcoming event. Terry, tell me about this year's Convoy.
Yes, so this is actually our 35th anniversary year. So we're very excited about that. Convoy started in 1990, and it started with a wish. A young man named Matt Strausser wished to ride in a truck and talk to his sister on a CB radio. And they asked for 2 trucks to show up and grant the wish, and 44 trucks arrived. So they decided to make it a convoy. And they've been doing it every year since. And actually, in conjunction with our 35th anniversary, our planning committee is actually calling it the Matt and Heather Strausser Memorial Convoy. Heather passed away shortly before our 33rd convoy, and then Matt passed right after our convoy last year. So we're honoring them and their families for kind of making all of this happen.
Wow. I mean, the 35th anniversary of anything is impressive, but having that, how will that change the convoy as far as just making it even more sentimental?
I think our focus really this year is on the wishes. So our chapter, really 75% of the wishes that we are able to grant in our area come from the donations that we raise through the convoy. And most of that comes from the truck drivers who participate. So we're going to make a big deal about wishes and wish makers at this year's event. And our hope is, fingers crossed, we actually might be able to grant a wish at the convoy. So we have a lot of wishes that are coming up for our region. And we hope to have a wish child there who is going to find out that their wish is granted at our presentation on Convoy Day.
Oh, wow. That, I assume, will only make it even more special.
Absolutely, yeah. We have people that come from all over the country, really, our truck drivers, and they fundraise all year long. And they're really, just the truck driving community in general, through being a part of this, they're so generous, and they're there for the wish children. We always give them a gift, and they said they'd rather just, have a wish child ride with them in the truck and see the excitement on their faces, because they're all about the kids that day. And we have our top 30 drivers every year are the highest fundraisers. So they've raised the most money from the year before, and they get to be called out in the top 30. Number 1 through 30 trucks are our front row at the event, and then they pull out and they lead out the convoy. So it's always fun to see them kind of compete with each other, but also try to raise more and more every year.
Do you find it's the same truck drivers that come back every year, or do you see new ones, or kind of a mixture of both?
I'd say it's a mixture of both. We've actually, for the last 3 years, we've had the same driver at number 1, which has been really rare. We have drivers go in and out of the top 30 based on, their year and what they can do. But we also get brand new drivers every year. The minimum to participate is a $100 donation. And some drivers will pay that themselves. Some of their companies will donate for them. But we have new companies, new drivers every year that come to the event.
Are you surprised every year at the generosity and at the support that you continue to see in the trucking community?
I should say I shouldn't be surprised because I've been involved with this so long, but it's a pleasant surprise every year when we see the totals and we see the numbers coming through. Our number one driver had a big goal last year to hit $50,000, and he surpassed it just on his own. Our top 10 drivers, I think, raised over $150,000 together. So the majority of what we raised, and last year our grand total was just under $560,000, and over $300,000 of that was just from the drivers. So it's incredible. We had 395 trucks last year. So it's a great event just to be able to say that we've helped grant wishes for our children. The average wish cost, depending on what they're doing, is around $10,000 to $12,000. So everything that we do for wishes is from donations coming in. We also, that day, while the trucks are parked in the lot, we also have a family carnival. So we have food, we have games, music, food trucks, all kinds of activities for families to join. And all of the money that we raise from the carnival also goes to granting wishes.
Now, this is granting wishes in a particular area, is that right?
It is. It's for, we're considered the Susquehanna Valley, so we're 5 counties in southeastern Pennsylvania. And Make-A-Wish has a national organization, but they also have hundreds of chapter offices around the country. Our chapter is Make-A-Wish Philadelphia, Delaware, and Susquehanna Valley. We've kind of combined three areas here, but the money raised from wishes stays in the Susquehanna Valley.
And are the truckers typically from that area, or do they come from all over, or do you know?
We have a lot of drivers from all over. I would say the majority of the trucks are from our area. We're actually in a really big, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, we have a big show truck family. We have a lot of trucking companies that have the fancy trucks, and they like to show them off. So we get a lot of them at the Convoy. But we also have other drivers. We have one guy in our top 30 who has been in the top 30 for years. He comes from New Jersey. We have other drivers who are from Kentucky. And we actually have a group of female drivers who participate in Real Women in Trucking, and they have a group that comes out, 5 or 6 drivers every year, and they make a weekend of it. And most of them are from the Midwest. So we have people from all over the country.
Can you talk to me about the logistics of it all, like the dates of when it starts and how it all kind of plays out?
Yep, absolutely. So we actually will start. So the live event is on Mother's Day. We will start the week before, 7 days before, on May 7th. Our online auction will go live. So we have a couple of amazing items that have been donated to us, and they'll be offered in an online auction that ends on Mother's Day. So then on Mother's Day, on May 12th, our family carnival will open up at 9 a.m. at Mannheim Auto Auction in Mannheim, Pennsylvania. The truckers can start pulling in at 6 a.m. And only the top 30 and sponsor trucks have designated parking spots. Everyone else will just kind of file in as they arrive. But the carnival opens at 9, so we have games, activities, music, food, lots of food trucks through the day. There will be an all-drivers meeting at 11 inside the main building, and every driver who has registered at wishconvoy.org will get a packet in the mail to let them know when and where the drivers meeting is. People can also register that day, but you can go on wishconvoy.org up until that weekend and register as a driver online. And then at noon, we'll have a presentation on our stage. We honor the top 30 drivers, all the families that come out, all the Wish children, and we'll have a special presentation this year in memory of Matt and Heather Strausser for the first Wish that was granted. Also at noon, we have our number one driver pull up to the stage, and they pull the Wish Angel trailer that day, which is a donated trailer that has stars all over it with the names of the Wish children we've lost in the last 35 years since the start of the convoy. So we honor those names of everyone in our area and have a special tribute to them. Then the drivers will go to their trucks, and the convoy starts rolling out at 1:30. And they travel from Mannheim Auto Auction, heading south towards Mount Joy, and they will drive straight down Main Street, Mount Joy, and most of them will depart after the convoy. Some will return, especially if they have a Wish child in their truck. They'll return to the auto auction lot, and the whole convoy route is about 25 miles. So typically, at least last year, we have trucks pulling back into the lot as the first truck or as the last trucks are still leaving. So we cover all 25 miles of the route, and then we wrap everything up around 3 o'clock.
How long have you been involved in the event?
My husband is a driver, and he grew up in Lancaster County, so he's always known about the convoy and always wanted to participate in it since he started driving. So he's been driving in it, I think, about 18 years. We started volunteering with the convoy about 10 years ago, and we have a planning committee of about 30 people. I've served as a volunteer coordinator. I've helped to park trucks, which I wasn't very good at, and done a lot of different jobs. And then I became chairman 4 years ago.
Wow.
And my husband actually has been in the top 30 drivers. This will be his 11th year in the top 30.
Nice. How much planning goes into this? I assume this is a big undertaking every year.
It is. We start, we have a monthly meeting with our full planning committee once a month starting in December, the whole way up through May. And we have people that run the games. We have people who run the music and entertainment, the food, and they have done an amazing job. We have some people on our committee who have been with the convoy since the beginning and just really know their stuff, and they're amazing. We can't do it without them. We also start working with the townships and boroughs that we drive our trucks through in the late winter, around February, just communicating with them, making sure everyone's on board and ready to go. And then we also have a committee who's specifically for emergency management, and we have wonderful teams of fire departments, EMTs, ambulance services that also drive their trucks in the convoy, and they lend their support on our emergency planning team to make sure that we've thought of everything. We also have employees from the Mannheim Auto Auction who volunteer their time every year. They clear out 3 lots of cars for us at one of the largest auctions in the country, so that we can park our trucks there. And a lot of them even volunteer on the day of the convoy. So they've been a great organization to work with. But it takes, upwards of 200, 250 people to put this thing on that day.
If anyone listening wants more information on this convoy, where can they go for that?
All of our information is on wishconvoy.org, including registering as a truck driver, registering as a fundraiser, information on the auction and the events that we're having that day, as well as how to volunteer. So everything is at wishconvoy.org.
That was Terry Finch talking about the Make-A-Wish Mother's Day Truck Convoy in Mannheim, Pennsylvania. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Capital Reman, your leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Let us help you avoid costly downtime and repairs by visiting capitalreman.com today. Use code OOIDA10 to receive your member benefits.
Get the most power and performance out of your rig with Howe's Diesel Defender. It provides maximum lubricity and contains specialized IDX4 detergent to clean and prevent deposits and safely removes harmful water. Visit HowesProducts.com for more information.
Attention professional drivers, do you owe money to the IRS? Integrity Tax Relief Group frees drivers from IRS trouble. Call for help now, 855-976-4291. That's 855-976-4291.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now. Welcome back. The OOIDA Board of Directors is a group of 22 truck drivers who set the priorities for the association and direct the staff regarding what issues OOIDA should pursue in its efforts to represent truckers. The board is meeting this week at OOIDA's headquarters in Grain Valley, Missouri, and a lot of the issues we discuss here on the show are on the agenda. Here to offer a preview is Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. Bryce, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Mark. How about yourself?
Very well, thank you. Look forward to seeing you here at headquarters here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Later this week. Let's kind of look at this in terms of general areas that you and your colleagues work on, and that'll be a part of the discussion with the board. What are the general categories, just for folks maybe who aren't familiar with what you all do there?
Yeah, so this, the board meeting twice a year is our opportunity to sit down with the board. Obviously, the board meeting has a lot more going on than just a government affairs update, but it's our chance both to update the board and get feedback from them about all the areas we're active. So, very broadly speaking, we keep them up to date on what's going on, in Congress, our legislative activity, and how we're staying engaged with Congress. Also, what's going on the regulatory side of things. We also keep them up to date on what's going on at the state level. And we also have make sure to keep them up to date on what's going on the media side of things. Obviously, the work we do is really important, but it's also really important that people know about and understand everything we're doing. So it's a pretty comprehensive overview of everything that we've been doing over the last 6 months or so since we last sat down with them.
Well, let's kind of take a look at some of these individually. And I want to talk a little bit about what's involved in the legislative area, meaning when you talk with the board, what kind of information are you going to convey, and what would you like to get back from the board in the way of feedback?
Yeah, and so for people who are regular listeners, none of this should be too surprising about what we're going to be updating them on. It's things like the ongoing speed limiter mandate and our efforts to fight that in Congress. It's our efforts to move the truck parking bill forward in Congress. And some other bills that are also priorities that are a little more, a little newer, including restroom access legislation to repeal the overtime exemption for truck drivers, and then kind of any other miscellaneous stuff that they might have on their mind. But by and large, it's the big ticket legislative item in Congress that we'll be focusing on. It's still a little early looking ahead to the next highway bill. It feels like we just finished this one now. But we're always interested to hear what the board has to say on these issues or anything else they're hearing about or seeing out on the road or hearing from other members about.
We cover a lot of the state issues here on the program, but it's been a while since we talked about the D.C. office's role in that. Doug Morris, your colleague there, handles that type of issue. And I know, for example, some of the issues, would be towing reform, which is a big thing on the state. Why are some of these issues particular to the state level instead of the federal level?
Yeah, and that's really just because of the way that authority is delegated to the states on these issues. And, sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing. But, when you're talking about predatory towing or other really more local or state-specific issues, those get delegated down to the states. I also think we periodically hear about truck parking issues at specific truck parking locations or different truck parking projects where there's either an interest in expanding truck parking capacity, or we hear about localities pushing back and trying to, ban truck parking or something like that. So those are more issues that we hear about on the state level. Of course, there's always California out there who's, depending on how you look at it, on the forefront or way behind on what they should be working on, but they're involved with things like autonomous or potentially driverless vehicles, stricter emission standards, things like that. So we also get involved at the state level in some ways on those issues.
Of course, we have your colleague Jay Grimes on the program every week to talk about regulatory matters. There is a lot going on, but I'm kind of curious that the board obviously is dealing with these regulations. How is their input particularly important when it comes to regulations and what the association pursues there?
Yeah, and so what the board offers is really the specific experience that's necessary to comment on these issues. Certainly I have a good deal of knowledge about a lot of the legislative stuff that we work on, but that's only because I've been listening to our board, listening to our members, and listening to, other folks that we have working at headquarters who have experience with this. Kind of the one that jumps out to me as you ask the question is on speed limiters. One of the things that is sometimes touted as a benefit of speed limiters is that it's going to help reduce emissions and save fuel. That's a benefit of the rule. But when you talk to board members and when you talk to truckers more generally, you hear about how they actually run their operations, how they manage their business, how they can spec their trucks, things like that. And you find out that it's not necessarily true that a speed limiter mandate would result in fuel savings. I know that's one very specific example, but I think that's how their knowledge contributes to what we do, and what helps Jay as part of the regulatory process is giving the evidence, the specifics that the regulatory agencies need to make decisions and actually, hopefully listen to us when they're crafting a rule. Obviously, big picture, when you have something like a rule that would basically mandate EV trucks is bad, but the agency needs some data and some supporting evidence to show why it really is problematic for small business truckers. So our board is able to help fill in those specifics and really make sure that the agencies have the information they should be using.
One area we haven't talked about a lot in terms of the DC office and its efforts that you mentioned earlier is the media. And of course, George O'Connor, your colleague up there, his entire job is kind of dealing with that particular portion on the government affairs issues. Why is that something important for the DC office to pursue?
And it's one of those things. If no one knows what you're doing, or if people aren't hearing about your messaging, then it's hard to get some traction on it. And with so many of our issues, it's important that the broader public is aware of the small business side of trucking issues. Unfortunately, the battle that we're fighting, and this is true both for what George does and what Narita does as well at our headquarters, is pushing back on some of these narratives like the driver shortage narrative, or the narrative that states need to be handing out grants for driver training because we can't get enough drivers. It's really important to help shape that public perspective to help us be effective, because if lawmakers and the public are only ever hearing one side of the story, whether that's coming from large carriers or whether it's coming from safety advocates, it makes it that much more difficult to change people's minds, or at least show them the light on some of these issues. So by having both George and Narita doing this day in, day out, building relationships, it can help to get our message out there and build that trust with folks in the media. And I think, kind of bringing it back bigger picture again, what we do with government affairs, it's establishing those relationships, establishing trust. And that's what's important about the board. Bringing it back to the board discussion is we get our information from them and we get our information from our members. And I think that's what helps us to be reliable and trustworthy messengers, is that we're not just pulling things out of thin air. We're not just pulling things from large corporations that are trying to satisfy stockholders or things like that. we take our message from the board, and that's what gets disseminated out, whether it's through our legislative efforts, whether through its state efforts, regulatory efforts, or in the media. So it's kind of all part of this big, I'd like to think, well-oiled machine that we have going.
Well, Bryce, I certainly appreciate all the information. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
I've been talking with Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. And folks, of course, you can play a role in this process. In fact, your role is very important. You need to call your members of Congress in the House and Senate about all these issues we discuss here on the show and all the issues in the trucking industry. And it's very simple to do. You've got two ways. You can dial the U.S. Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121, or you can contact your members of Congress through the website, fightingfortruckers.com. That's our program for today. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.